Hey, what is going on, everybody, and welcome to the College Info Geek podcast, the internet's best resource for getting ahead as a student or possibly even a non-student, but a terrible resource for learning how to chisel your own face into Mount Rushmore. In fact, I don't think there
all
are...
four faces?
All of them. Oh, yeah.
Into one?
Now, I am working on a new online course on how to clandestinely chisel your own face to replace all of the presidents. In fact, actually, wait, is it? It's all presidents, right? It's Washington, man. It's Lincoln.
I went there this one time.
Is I think Roosevelt, and then the fourth one.
I don't remember all four. It's like none of them are.
I feel like I should know.
I don't know
who is on Mount Rushmore. Oh, Jefferson. Okay, my guess is that it's Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt. But I could be wrong about that. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a tweet from somebody named Smart Wealth Mindset. I guess they wrote an article about people who helped them learn about money, and they have photoshopped a picture of Mount Rushmore that has my face on it.
Nice.
Next to Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income and Matt and Andrew from Listen Money Matters.
That's the real one.
So this is what Mount Rushmore should look like, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, following my new online course. Only 3 easy payments and 1 hard payment.
Well, and the best part is that your hair is still darker, so like they'd have to spray paint the mountain or something.
Oh yeah, we're gonna spray paint the mountain.
So just for like a beard.
Oh yeah, it's not really gonna be like going for the statuesque look. It's gonna be going for like the illusion that I literally am popping out of the mountain as a gigantic head.
Yeah.
Like every visitor to Mount Rushmore will wonder like, did they ingest some sort of psychoactive substance?
And they will at the gift shop.
Yes.
It's right out front.
Anyway, all right. So we're doing an episode today on, am I reading this correctly? Ultralord?
Yeah, it's
like
Ultralord. We're talking about Ultralord today.
Like your top favorite episodes or comic books from Ultralord?
I was a fan of the movie.
The Ultralord movie?
Yeah.
Or you mean the Jimmy Neutron movie?
Both. Everything.
All right. So no, what we're going to talk about is a book that came out. I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was late last year, called Ultralearning, Master Hard Skills, Outsmart the Competition, and Accelerate Your Career by Scott H. Young, who is a blogger that I've been following for many years.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've never met Scott personally, though I think I've talked to him on Twitter a few times. And if I am not incorrect, I believe he lives in Vancouver or somewhere aroundabouts. Because I remember talking to him about how I may be going up there again at some point in the future to hang out with my friend Noah from Polyphonic, and he's like, "Hey, I'm there too."
I know of a lot of people that are up there. Northwest has a lot of people that I'm aware of.
Vancouver people, yeah.
In like the music or video games or all sorts of just things.
Joey from Better Ideas is in Vancouver-ish area. Linus Tech Tips, they're in Surrey. Yeah, so many Vancouverites. And then I'm assuming a lot of the game dev people you're thinking of are in Seattle.
Also Vancouver.
Or in Vancouver.
Both.
Maybe Portland. Oh, and the dude who runs the company that made my DDR pads. Portland.
Oh.
So many cool people.
Northwest is a good place.
My theory is it's raining all the time, so the only thing they can do is just stay inside and build DDR pads or write books about learning Ultra in an Ultra way.
That's got to be it. I assume that is true. Building DDR pads is an adaptive response.
Yeah.
to rain.
To the rain. Okay, so to put this up front, I have not read this book. In fact, the last 3 months of my life, I have been absolutely consumed with filmmaking education. So the last quote-unquote book that I read is something I linked to in my latest newsletter, which is just this online workflow guide from frame.io, and it's like 100,000 words of Hollywood level pro workflow stuff. So I now understand color depth and like color spaces. I know what Rec 709 is. I know what HDR color is. I know like BT 2020, all this stuff. But I have not had time to read productivity books as a result.
That seems perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, which is fine, because I have you.
Yeah, I already read it.
Yeah.
So, problem solved.
So this is going to be an episode where you shall school me on what it truly takes to be an ultra learner.
Mostly the Ultralord stuff. But
yeah, So aside from Ultralord, what's this book about?
It's about the concept of ultralearning, which he defines as a strategy for acquiring skills and knowledge that is both self-directed and intense. Now, this is because Scott has done several challenges of his own, ultralearning challenges.
Right. Scott's the guy who did the entire self-directed MIT computer science program in a year.
Yep.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's just using the online free resources like the class lectures and then testing himself and those sort of things. Went through the whole thing in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I found out about this book completely separately from, I didn't realize that you knew of this person because I just found a review of it on the Fluent in 3 Months blog.
Wait, you didn't know?
No, not at all. This is a coincidence.
He sent me a free copy of the book.
Coincidence entirely.
Okay.
I found it on the Fluent in 3 Months blog.
Okay.
Because it mentioned that he learned languages through Ultralearning as well.
Because Scott, does he speak Chinese? I think maybe another language. I can't remember.
I think Mandarin might have been one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He had gone through a whole year speaking no English. So every 3 months, it would be a different country trying to learn that language.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of thing obviously is interesting to me. But the thing that actually made me say I should read this book and buy it immediately was there was also a photo showing how he learned how to draw much more realistic faces in 30 days.
Oh, do you have the photo?
I do, but I'm going to...
Jamie, pull the clip. Dang, 30 days. I mean, that's incredible.
So I saw that, and then I was like, well, that's real.
That's really impressive.
And I don't think this will be very visible, but here you go. I'll put it by my face where everything should be focused.
Yeah,
just enhance.
Like 2 pixels.
Just enhance. Otherwise, it'll be in the show notes. But I saw that, and I was just like, well, that's obviously... There's something there, clearly, because I can't deny those results.
Yeah.
So, and I was also starting to consider my New Year's goals. So I'm going to get remotivated, revived. Yeah. To quote,
nobody else will ever know that reference.
Old, long deleted Spotify album.
It's a good song. You should repost that one song.
And I'll remaster it.
Or remaster.
I got to remaster it. The recording quality.
Oh, hey, we could
then.
redo the beat. on my synth.
I could do it all better.
Except for the beat was more of like a circuit bending kind of thing. So we're gonna have to take apart an NES.
Oh yeah, it used bent circuit samples. It was pretty cool. But anyway, that's why I decided to read it. Complete coincidence that apparently you got a free copy and know the person and all this other stuff. I had no idea.
It's less of a coincidence than you think, because Benny
connected.
Lewis, who runs Fluent in 3 Months, who is a good friend of mine, also knows Scott. I think he knows Scott a lot better than I do.
Yeah, I mean it's all connected, but it would be hard for me to avoid that kind of connection.
We're all part of the weird cabal of internet productivity
it's a cabal.
/ language learning bloggers. I'm not a language learning blogger, but I feel like there is quite a bit of overlap between academic skills and productivity people on the internet and language learning people on the internet.
Yeah.
I know at least 3 people who do language learning content pretty well. So and it makes sense because people who are learning languages, they want to learn how to learn those languages faster.
Yeah.
So they often come to speed reading videos or memorization videos, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, that's everything that this book is about. And he lays out the concept in nine principles of ultralearning. So I got a couple notes for each. Obviously, I can't go over the whole book. Just read the book or get an audiobook or something.
So this is just an overview of the book. And I'm interested
to touch on each of the 9 things, but I can't dive into all the nuance. This will be a 5-hour. It might as well have been the audiobook at that point.
This would be really long. Yeah, we're just gonna.
But I thought
in an unauthorized way read the entire book on the podcast.
Yeah. Now, I thought maybe we could go over the 9 principles.
Okay.
Maybe see if there are any things that connect with stuff that we've done, or maybe areas where we're like, I should have done that. That would have been smarter.
Yeah.
Just to.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious
about. Bring the
about.
examples home, because there were actually a couple of things in here that either they were really resonating with me. Mm-hmm. So,
all right, we'll cue up lesson 1.
Number 1 is metalearning. So it's actually pretty useful that you just mentioned how people go to language learning blogs to learn how to do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Because metalearning is learning about the thing that you want to learn and how to learn it. You're laying the groundwork.
Learning about the thing you want to learn.
So an example here that will make this more clear is if you're learning, the example he gives is that if you're learning Chinese characters, you will learn that a certain Hansu that I can't show you the illustration, I can't show you the actual character right now, But a certain Chinese character means fire. That is just learning. You're learning the language. That's an actual thing with the meaning.
And you said Hansu. What does that mean?
That's the Chinese word for kanji.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
My bad.
Which for
anyway.
people who don't speak Japanese is just the complex characters
I have a little bit
that
of
often represent.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a language learning podcast. Anyway, the cool like illustrative looking characters from Chinese and Japanese.
In many cases, one kanji represents an entire word.
Yeah. So you'll find one that means fire.
Okay.
That's just learning a language regularly. But when you learn that those same symbols, this applies also to both Chinese and Japanese in this case, when you learn that those symbols are often organized by radicals, which are smaller chunks of images that get put together to make a character, and that those radicals tend to inform a little bit about either the word's meaning or its pronunciation, which is really useful, that extra side thing is meta-learning. You're learning about the thing so that you can learn the thing better. Because you could totally learn... I'm quite sure there are many native speakers of both languages, both Mandarin and Japanese, that don't have any idea how to explain radicals.
Yeah.
Like, they have just done it. It's just natural. It would be harder for an English speaker to explain its grammar than somebody who just finished learning English.
So this sounds like just kind of a way to put a label on the practice of learning the underlying systems and components of what you're trying to learn rather than just attacking it in a very direct way.
Yeah, so it's like first lay a little bit of groundwork just so that you don't go in completely the opposite direction of where you might want to go.
So maybe another analogy could be learning how recursion actually works instead of just staring at code that makes recursion happen and trying to memorize how the code is laid out.
Maybe.
Would that be an example? Or
I think I would just consider that more of a subtopic.
Okay.
But maybe learning what kind of editors, what the difference between a few coding editors. Like, you need to learn how everything works before you can even get into the work itself.
Okay.
If I had to compare a mirrorless and a DSLR camera before I got into photography, it would be meta-learning in my understanding to learn that and then be like, oh, well, I should get this camera because of this reason, because I didn't need to learn that at all to take photos, but it was useful for me to know it first.
Okay.
But meta-learning is the most abstract one that is going to have the least obvious things to just tell you to do.
So for any given skill or topic area, how would one start the process of meta-learning? And how do you know how much time to spend in meta-learning versus more traditional learning?
Now, I can't remember if it's from this book or something else. All of this stuff floats around in my head now. But I probably wouldn't spend too long on meta-learning. Maybe a week or two, maybe some sort of just initial research before you get into it. Like, if I didn't know anything about language learning and I wanted to start learning Japanese in March, I would probably be well served if I spent the next couple weeks kind of like, what are all the resources available to me? What am I going to need to know? What am I in for? Oh, there are 3 writing systems. Okay, that's good to know ahead of time. What else is going to happen here? And then I can maybe plan out how I'm going to tackle those so that when I get to it, I don't start in March and then be completely overwhelmed. Like, well, I just opened up Duolingo, started pressing buttons. I don't know what any of this is, and I'm really confused, and it's hard to categorize it in my head, and therefore it's hard to understand it.
Okay.
But yeah, just maybe a couple weeks, just like the exploratory phases of learning a new skill.
So number 2 then?
Yeah, number 2 is, now this one we actually talk about a lot, so it's going to be real easy to get through this one. Focus.
Okay.
We talk about this all the time. So
the one topic
that we've probably covered,
everyone's heard about
all the time,
5,000 times, but nobody actually does, including me.
So he talks about procrastination a little bit. He talks about how usually what we think about that's unpleasant in a task or maybe pleasant in a distraction, it's usually just a bit of an impulse, and it wouldn't last long once we started. I feel a lot of a resistance, like this is going to be the worst thing ever. Yeah. And I've put off an article for several months thinking, oh God, it's going to be so hard. There's so much work. And I sat down and did it in like 3 hours. The resistance that I thought, the unpleasant feeling I thought would be there was like 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
So obviously things like Pomodoro sessions, where you just set the timer and try to go through it, they can help you merely because that unpleasant thing that you think exists is just a little bit of an impulse. It's not nearly what you imagined it is.
Yeah. The way my brain perceives the act of writing a video is like, I would equate it to how you would perceive trying to run headfirst through like a 20-foot long block of ballistics gel. To make, a totally relatable metaphor here. Everyone's done this
I've
before.
done that.
But in reality, it's more like just running through a couple of kids playing Red Rover. Like, there's some resistance right at the beginning of it, but then like you break through it and then there's just nothing. And you're fine.
Yeah.
You get into it. But no matter how many times I tell myself this, my brain still thinks, the entire process of writing this article is going to suck and it's going to be like slogging your way through ballistics gel. And every single step is going to be a fight. So let me go read this review of this camera first, because, that's also kind of work. I need to know about that.
Yeah. And then the longer you put it off, like the more scary you think it is. 'Cause you're like, well, now I'm out of practice. I'm rusty. Mm-hmm. How am I going to do it now? I don't even know what the topic is. I have to do the refresher first, and that's going to take time. Might as well not.
I was watching this. There's a channel called This Guy Edits. And it's a wonderful channel for anybody who's doing their own videos. And this guy is like a dude who does literal, short films that have won Sundance, like an actual professional editor. But he has a YouTube channel too. And his editing on the YouTube channel is also great. But he did a video where it was kind of about how to edit a documentary. And he was talking to the lead editor for a documentary called The Square, which is all about the Egyptian revolution that happened just recently. And just one little tidbit that I remember from this, the lead editor was talking about, the productivity that goes into getting a documentary done. And he was saying, like, you just need to worry about being fast and making moves as quickly as you can, because if you don't, you're going to get into this headspace where you're afraid to start making cuts. You're afraid to start putting things together because you don't know if it's going to be perfect. And just this one little sentence he said, it's like, when you start putting clips next to each other and you start making a mess on your timeline, that in itself will give you ideas. And I realized, like, yeah, he's right. When I start editing, it's like the process of putting together a puzzle. And like, I'm like, all right, does this piece fit here? No, it doesn't. But maybe it goes over here. And like, you have to actually make those moves.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems where I'm like, okay, now before I start my day, I would like to preemptively solve every problem I might face today.
Yeah.
Go. We got 1,000 problems. We'll solve them all, and then we'll start. Mm-hmm. But that is a great way to erase my mornings.
Yep.
And then I have to solve all new problems now because I've wasted so much time. But he talks about also how the habit for working on something can fade. So even if you used to meditate 20 minutes a day for years, if right now you're trying to get back to it after a break and you keep putting it off, or you just can't get through the 20 minutes, or you don't want to do it, then sometimes we need to start over anyway, even if we should have been better. It's like working out. If I got super buff, gave up working out for 3 years and came back, I can't lift the same. So we got to start back with like 5 minutes and then moving up from there. And actually the most useful thing that I found in this section was just the acknowledgement that different types of tasks need different environments for focus sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So he mentioned complex tasks, they need like super direct focus. So when I'm doing some sort of coding, there needs to be no one around me. Even just somebody sitting around me, not talking to me, I'm actively confused and I cannot focus on my work. It throws me off entirely if I'm coding. But if I'm doing a bunch of smaller tasks, I absolutely cannot be trusted to do those completely alone in a focused environment. I need music. I need coffee shop noises. I need people. I need something that kind of eases the tension so that I don't take the amount of small things I'm doing so seriously.
Yeah.
Like they're not worthy of my full focus, so I don't want to give it to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely find that, well, I guess it's a little different for me because Well, it's tough to say because it's either the writing or the editing. For the writing, I definitely do best when I go out somewhere, even though there are people around me. But I just put the headphones on. I'm just like good to go.
Well, headphones are pretty good at that, though. The noise canceling stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps a lot.
That's a really good way for isolation, regardless. I can't focus because I'm like, what if somebody says something and I need to pull out my headphone? I'm thinking way too many steps ahead, so.
Yeah, and I
need,
definitely
like, no
do.
possibilities.
I have more trouble focusing if like I go somewhere with Anna because a lot of times she'll ask for feedback, and I'm just like, what I should do is be like, hey, can I have like an hour, just no interruptions? But what I actually do is not say anything because I'm trying to be polite.
Yeah.
And I'm caught between this like dichotomy of wanting to be available for feedback, but also wanting to focus, and those cannot exist together.
Yeah, that's my thing. I anticipate the interruption, and then I act as if it was already there. Doesn't.
Yeah.
Unnecessary.
So what's our third
Anyway,
element?
yeah, the third thing is directness. This is the part where it started getting into stuff where I was like, I haven't necessarily heard people say this before.
Okay.
And I thought this was really cool. It started off with a quote from, our boy Leo Devi. I miss hearing from him.
I always have a good quote from my boy Leo Devi.
It's been a bit, but the quote is, He who can go to the fountain does not go to the water jar. And that's that was basically Da Vinci talking about his feelings on people learning only from teachers. Because he was like, I can discover and understand and learn this stuff myself, and that is better than to just have somebody bring it to me. Now, later he did open up a little bit more to other forms of education, but I digress. The point is, the directness of learning for yourself is a completely different experience from merely reading some PowerPoint slides.
Yeah. That was a big thing in college for me, because I noticed like a lot of my friends, to study for tests, they would just open up the lecture slides and scroll through them instead of sitting down and working problems. It's a very indirect method. I think I'm just going to learn how to do this by osmosis.
It's also a very ineffective method.
And, my brain gravitates immediately towards understanding music theory and understanding keys and things like that. I can sit there and, try to memorize, like, all right, the key of D minor has these notes in it. But when I directly go to the piano or to the guitar and find those notes and then play them and then, all right, I'm going to build the chords, build a triad. All right, I'm going to build my second triad, my third triad. Now I'm going to try first inversion for each of them, second inversion, and I'm going to just like hit them over and over again. Then I start to intuitively understand every aspect of the key.
Yeah.
Much more quickly than if I were to just sit there being like, all right, I'm looking at it. Here's the first inversion. Okay, I get it. Just like looking at it in a book,
Yeah.
Like, you could learn it that way, but why do that when you could go sit at the piano and play those inversions?
Yeah, and basically the core tenet of this section is that you should make your learning process as close to the situation or context you want to use the skill in as possible. And this is a big problem with schools, because you'll graduate from college, you have to relearn everything as soon as you get to your job.
Yeah.
Because you've only ever learned things from PowerPoint slides or multiple choice things, or in a language class you've only ever learned how to respond to like the same 5 conversations.
Yeah.
And it's just basically the concept of transfer, the idea that we learn skills in one area and can just freely bring them over to another area, is a lot weaker than we would like it to be, at least when it comes to the abstractions we use in school.
Yeah.
Like, the skills don't really transfer that much because your brain doesn't have the pathways built to access that knowledge in that particular way. So just like you might be able to take 4 years of French in high school and you can still read it, you learned how to do that, but you can't think of like any words at all in a conversation. It's because the context is different. You're not going to be able to remember it that way without doing it that way. Yeah,
it's true. I guess like when you build neural pathways that always start from a specific area, then it's very difficult to access like the middle of it.
Yeah, you're making that knowledge
learned
incredibly rigid, and you need it to be flexible so that you can actually use it. And you get that through direct interaction in many different situations until you've got tons of different examples of what you might do with this skill set. And now it's open up, and you can transfer the skill a little better.
Mm-hmm.
You can transfer pieces of skills once you've gotten really good at them. But in the beginning, if all you did was like get a C in your class doing the homework, you probably won't be able to do the skill that they want you to do that much.
Yeah. This week's episode of our show is brought to you by our friends over at Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning library that can help you to boost your skills, become more creative, and also become more competitive in your job field. And that is because they have thousands of classes on a ton of different topics that can make you more competitive. They have classes on video editing, on digital illustration, graphic design, Procreate classes on the iPad, and lots of productivity classes as well. And because I recently launched a new class on Skillshare, I want to tell you all about that. I have a brand new class all about how to build strong habits and how to determine what your habits should be based on your long-term goals. So if you're the kind of person who has a lot that you want to do, but you find yourself not putting in the time every single day that is required to make progress in those goals, I think this course is going to be very, very helpful for you. Again, it helps you to take those goals and figure out what is the action that you should distill and do right now, and then how do you make yourself actually do that action every single day, or at least on a regular basis over the long run. It is February 5th or 6th right now? So this is probably right around the time that most people are failing on their New Year's resolutions. It's been more than a month.
Shots fired.
It's been more than a month since January 1st. But if you don't want to be one of those people who is failing a New Year's resolution, or if you want to pick one back up that you committed to and maybe fell off the horse for a little bit, I think it's going to be a pretty useful course. Also on Skillshare, you'll find another course from yours truly about productivity systems. This one is all about how to make your to-do list, your calendar, your note-taking system, the system for storing your files, make it all work harmoniously so that nothing ever slips through the cracks and that you're kind of always on top of everything going on in your life. But I don't want to just promote my own stuff because, again, there are thousands of classes on Skillshare. And in the video that I did at the end of last year on 10 YouTube channels that you should be subscribed to, one of them was called YC Imaging. This guy named Christopher Rhodes, he does awesome music videos, and he kind of breaks down how he does music videos. He makes them look super professional, but he often does them on a pretty shoestring budget. And he just recently launched his own Skillshare class called, I wrote it down somewhere here, Video on a Budget. So he talks about scouting locations. He talks about how to rent gear. He talks about how to get really cool shots, even if you have inexpensive gear. So if you're the kind of person who likes to make videos and wants to up your game a little bit, which is definitely an apt description of me, then you may want to take that class as well. And the best part about Skillshare is it's a very affordable platform. It's less than $10 a month, so it's basically a Netflix subscription that is a heck of a lot more useful to your future. And if you want to try it out before committing to paying that, you can go over to Skillshare.com/geek. And if you're one of the first 500 people to do that, you're going to get a 2-month free trial with unlimited access to the platform. And let me tell you, there's a heck of a lot you can learn in 2 months, including taking both of my classes. So if you're one of the first 500 people to go to Skillshare.com/geek, you can essentially take my classes for free. And also, if you have the self-discipline to do it, take a ton more. Just overlearn a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, this is prime opportunity for an Ultralearning project here.
That's true, yeah. So thanks, as always, to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode and being a big supporter of our show. And I also have to give a second thanks and shout out to our second sponsor, which is Dashlane. I love Dashlane. I've been using Dashlane for probably close to 2 years now. Dashlane is, number one, how I make sure I stay as secure as I possibly can be on the internet, and number two, how I reduce a lot of friction in my life. And that is because Dashlane gives you a tool that exists on all of your platforms to store your passwords in an ultra secure manner. Dashlane does not have access to your passwords. It is all stored with an encrypted master password that only you know, but it gives you a super convenient way to log into all of the websites that you use on a daily basis. Once you log into a website for the first time or create a new account, Dashlane asks if you want to save that password, and then it is securely stored within the app. You have it on your iPhone, your Android, your Mac, your PC, web browser extensions, and then it automatically logs you in to websites from then on. And unlike systems like Keychain on the Mac or Chrome, you're not locked into one system. You have access to it on basically any platform you're using. So this goes with you where you go. In addition to the password storage features, they also will automatically fill in long forms for you. So if you're trying to buy a boosted board or fill in just a really long form on some webpage somewhere, it just does it for you in like a second instead of you having to tab through it and type your name and type your address and all that kind of stuff, which again reduces the amount of friction that you have to deal with in your life. So if you want to check out Dashlane, you can actually go over to dashlane.com/collegeinfogeek and get a free 30-day trial of their premium service. Test out all the features for yourself. And if you like it, if you want to actually buy it afterwards, you can also use the code collegeinfogeek at checkout to get 10% off. So once again, dashlane.com/collegeinfogeek, and big thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring this episode and supporting our podcast. Let's get back into it. Okay, so far we have meta-learning, learning about the thing you're going to learn.
Yeah.
We have
lay some groundwork,
figuring out how to build focus, and then we have the directness with which you approach your topic.
Yeah.
So that's the first third of it. All right. So next one?
The next one is drill.
Drill. Okay.
Yeah. So basically,
just do it over and over and over again.
Find your weaknesses specifically.
Oh, okay.
And drill those. So he talks about the rate determining step, which is a chemistry term for the slowest part of a reaction with several steps, because it determines the overall speed. It's the slowest one, and everything's waiting for it. So it's basically the slowest hiker metaphor we've used in previous episodes. And yes, I do in fact prefer to call it your Russell, because Russell from up is clearly the slowest hiker. But you have a whole group of hikers, and they're walking in a single file line. The whole group, if they want to stick together, is only as fast as the slowest hiker. And anything you can do to improve the speed of the slowest hiker, give his backpack to one of the faster kids. Now the whole line is faster in the most efficient way possible. Mm-hmm. So similarly, you want to find your weakness, the biggest weakness you have in whatever concept you're trying to work through, because that's the most efficient way for you to get better.
Yeah.
If I'm learning a language and I don't have good pronunciation, that's going to hold me back from every conversation. Every conversation is going to feel so difficult. The most easy greeting, or a conversation about like politics or something, it doesn't matter. I can't make the words come out of my mouth. Even if they're all in my head, it doesn't help. So the most efficient way to get better isn't to go keep learning more words. That doesn't help me. If I help one thing, it'll help everything else. And I do this with piano as well, because if I'm trying to do a section and I keep missing a note, then what I can do is do that section, and then like right before I hit it, I'll freeze wherever my hand is right before I'm about to hit that. And I'll be like, my elbow's too far out, or this finger got caught under that key. I see why I keep missing. And you can find your weaknesses, isolate them, work on that piece, and then insert it into the final puzzle where it works again.
I found with guitar, my big weakness right now is descending on scales. It's very weird to me, because like I can ascend a scale very smoothly, and I don't even know what you call it, but you know, like that where you go down a note, or I guess you go down 2 notes and then back up 1, and then down 2 and then back up 1. So it's just like like that going down, so easy. But just straight up descending a scale, it's much slower. I don't know what it is. So when I practice now, a lot of my time practicing is just descend this scale, work on the smoothness of it. I don't know what exactly it is. I think part of it is when you're ascending a scale, you're, say like my index finger is holding down like the 5th fret, and my ring finger is going for the 7th. That is closer to where I'm hitting the pick. So the accuracy doesn't matter quite as much, because it may end up just being like a bit of a hammer-on. But descending a scale, if I'm not holding all 3 frets and then just letting go, if I'm just trying to like go one finger, next finger, then I might pick during the transition, and it'll just hit like, it'll just like make the string sound bad. I don't know. That's my theory. But in any case, I have to practice that a lot more.
Yeah, and part of what my piano teacher's been having me do is start the song from this measure instead. Do this by itself. Can you start there, or do you literally only know it once you start from the beginning?
Well, it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid playing Guitar Hero. There was a practice mode where you could say like, I'm going to start from here, I think. So I would just like loop that section over and again to learn like the Through the Fire and Flames solo or something.
Yeah.
And then a big one for me recently has been video editing. So I've long considered my weak point in video editing to be music, because I never quite understood how to make background music sound good. And I would listen through tracks and be like, oh, this doesn't sound good. And for the longest time, just like with math when I was a kid, it's like, I'm just not good at that. I don't have that skill. I'm not good at figuring out background music. But lately, I've realized that's my weak point, so I'm going to worry. I'm just going to focus in on that. So I've been watching all these documentaries and paying really close attention to films. Like, all right, how's the music interacting with the dialogue? At what point does it go away? What kind of note is it ending on? Is it like, are we waiting for a soft part in the song, or is it like a big high note and then it just ends there? And I've been trying to kind of replicate what I've learned in my own videos. And with the last couple, I've been realizing, like, oh, I kind of understand this now. And I've been able to craft some moments that feel really good.
Yeah, if you just focus on that one little thing, it doesn't have to take all that long before you realize how much you can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially just to a functional level, it probably isn't going to take that long if you have a vague idea of what you're doing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Mambo number 5 is retrieval.
Okay.
So
active learning, I'm guessing?
Yeah, basically we learn things better when we try to remember them ourselves rather than, again, scanning a PowerPoint slide and going, yeah, I probably learned that.
Yeah.
I read the words. And I already knew that, but I really liked this next quote that he had in here. He presented a paradox, and it's, if the learning task feels easy and smooth, we are more likely to believe we've learned it. If the task feels like a struggle, we'll feel like we haven't learned it yet. And yet the complete opposite is true, because only when you feel like you're struggling are you actually learning and pushing your brain. If it feels easy, like reading through a PowerPoint slide, that just means you weren't really using much. You didn't have to use your thoughts. You weren't learning.
You're doing something that's just become automatic already.
Yeah, that's why it was easy. You weren't learning. In your case, if you're reading a PowerPoint slide, all you did was read.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because you really know the topic, but reading a PowerPoint slide and going, that didn't feel so bad, doesn't tell you anything at all.
Mm-hmm. So when I'm editing a video and I feel like it's kind of a garbage fire in the middle, it's probably a good sign.
Yeah, it just means you're pushing your brain. And obviously, like, human brains are lazy and we don't want to feel discomfort. But that discomfort is when we're pushing ourselves somewhere.
Yeah.
Things shouldn't feel too easy.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. Yeah, I've noticed, so like the past, maybe from like the end of my burnout last year through, going back a few years almost, editing the first cut of a video always felt very easy because I would just sit in front of the camera and talk through my outline of my script. And I kind of knew, like, that's the underlying core of the video. And because of that, I was able to cut a decent version of the video in like 30 minutes. And I'm like, that could go online. It would be boring because it's just talking head, but it could go online. And the style we've been trying to do lately, we're mixing in voiceover, we're mixing in all this kind of stuff.
It's ridiculous now.
It's ridiculous. But the thing I was noticing is we'd get like Tony would make the initial rough cut and I'd watch it and I'm like, oh, this is awful. There's so many awkward points and things like that. And I realized, like, oh, that's because we're crafting something more worthwhile, and there's going to be a stage where you just don't know what it is yet. So there are going to be all these transition points where it's just like, it just doesn't feel right yet. And I was reading this thread in the r/editors subreddit, which is for like professional editors, and they were talking about how like a lot of directors these days seem to be a little bit impatient because they'll look at a rough cut and they'll be like, this isn't good. Maybe I should fire this editor. And there were some old school editors in the chat, and they were like, yeah, directors worth their salt understand that, like, or some director who said, I think it was Scorsese, who said, like, if you don't want to kill yourself when you watch the first rough cut, you're not doing it correctly.
Well, sounds like a fun process.
But that gave me some perspective on it. I'm like, yeah, if you're crafting something that is suitably complex and you're trying to, knit together this convincing narrative out of all these different pieces, there's gonna be a part where, in the process where like you have everything on the timeline. And really the question you're trying to answer is, does this work narratively? Like, do we need to go reshoot stuff? Do we need to cut this section entirely? Not, does this transition feel finessed enough? Because you're just not that far along in the process.
Yeah.
So that was helpful to hear from professional editors. But it's been cool going through this process that even though it's frustrating, I kind of know like I'm actually learning and upping my game instead of just doing the same thing I've been doing for years where it's get the A roll, okay, nailed, it's good. And like you said, if it feels easy, then I'm not really learning.
Yeah. So a couple other things with the retrieval. We've talked about this before. You have a video on spaced repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So spaced repetition uses the spacing effect where basically the longer you wait before you try to remember something, if you successfully remember it, the stronger your memory will be. So you can do a sort of clever schedule where you start out reviewing something like daily for a few days, and then every other day, and then every other week, and then every other month, and that's the strongest way to build the memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are really good things like that, like Anki with flashcards, plenty of things to do that. And then for reading, more complex things you can't put on a flashcard and test yourself on like that.
Yeah, it's harder to build an algorithm around the exact days you should wait for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Scott suggests that after reading a section from a book, or maybe you're sitting through a lecture, try to write down everything you can remember. And now it's after. So if you are sitting in a lecture just typing every single thing the teacher says, then you're not necessarily giving your focus to what they're saying, nor are you practicing recall. You're just practicing transcription, which is different entirely. And maybe this makes me sound like I was a terrible student, but this is the reason that I just didn't really take notes in almost any class, because I was just listening to the teacher. I was just trying to hear the words, because I found that if I did try to take notes, it would kind of give my brain permission to, I'll learn that later. I mean, I have the notes right here.
Yeah.
Only to then never bother to learn it later, and because I didn't like reviewing my notes. So I would have done a little better had I waited until after a lecture and then tried to rephrase everything and write it all down from memory immediately. Because it's just, do you understand what just happened? Did you pay attention, or were you just kind of letting words happen?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this is very directed at the shortcomings of classes, not because classes can't be a good idea, but because they will work 1,000 times better if we just put a little extra effort into our own personal learning process within the class.
I think that my interest in applying what I'm learning from the subject in a very short amount of time, like after I learn it, is much more important than taking notes from what I'm reading. Like, if I'm reading a book and I'm like, well, I'm not going to use this, then it's almost as if like taking notes is sort of a stand-in for a lack of opportunity to apply what you're learning quickly after learning it. And if you have an opportunity to apply things, then perhaps taking meticulous notes is not as necessary.
Yeah.
Because even if you do, you're probably only going to be able to utilize a little bit of that anyway in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and he did mention, like, if it wasn't just, I'm going to read a section and then afterward I'm going to try to just write down what I thought the point was, then he was finding it easy to get kind of fixated on this meaningless date that's like, it's information, but it's not really useful for the skill. Yeah, basically this is something that I also do in language because I have to bring back the word myself. If it takes me too long to come up with a word in conversation, the best thing for me to do is not to look it up in a dictionary, but to try to word my way around needing to use that word, just describe it in a different way, and then see if I can come up with it later. And I can look it up later if I have to. Yeah. But if I don't, I'm not practicing recall, and I won't strengthen any memories. And I will also potentially build a habit of learned helplessness, where I think I need a dictionary every 4 seconds, which is not great for conversational fluidity.
Yeah. All right, so what are we on, number 6?
Yeah, we're on number 6, cool. And that is feedback.
Yep.
We need frequent, honest, and useful feedback. Good feedback does not need to be comfortable, and in fact is often uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we don't want it, but we do really need it. Most of the ultralearning projects he talks about in this book they're very intense, and they allow the people undertaking them to get a ton of feedback much more quickly than you would normally get. Now, one example he gave of somebody with an ultralearning project that wasn't himself, I don't remember the name, but they wanted to become a good speaker. They didn't really have a speaking experience that much. They wanted to do Toastmasters sort of stuff and figure out how to speak well publicly. So instead of prepping a speech for a month or two and then every month or so giving a new speech, he dove right in, spoke several times per week, and went to different audiences to get different perspectives.
Oh,
just
yeah.
immediately.
So did he do the same speech each time?
I don't think so.
Or was it like extemporaneous?
I don't think all of them would have been the same speech. It was just writing and giving tons of speeches in tons of places because different audiences give different feedback. If you're speaking in front of a bunch of 7th graders, you're going to get a different like value and type of feedback than you will from like attentive adults who love the topic you're talking about. They'll pay attention, but a bunch of 7th graders, you'll know if you're boring.
Yeah.
Because they will not even attempt to pay attention to you. They'll be harsh. And you need different audiences to get that kind of nuance. An extra bonus in this particular case was he became desensitized to the anxiety of speaking merely because he forced himself to feel so much of it.
Yeah.
That desensitization happens with most things that I'm aware of. So he was just probably felt tortured for the first little bit of that. But he became desensitized and then was able to keep pushing even further. Now, some really helpful notes on what kind of feedback is useful in here. And I'm just going to read this quote. Feedback often backfires when it's aimed at a person's ego. Praise, a common type of feedback that teachers often use and students enjoy, is usually harmful to further learning. So we don't want to focus on stuff that's aimed at our ego. We want it to be focused on the quality of the thing that we're doing, not necessarily like, you're great, but that is good. That's really good. That's a thing that you did. That's useful. And then who is giving the feedback matters, because if we're getting feedback from a peer or a teacher or our parent, those are all different social implications.
Yeah.
So this would be why I didn't want to take speech class with friends. Like, I hear about a lot of people wanted to do that because of the comfort. But for me, I don't want to give speeches in front of my friends because I didn't want to fail in front of people whose opinions I valued. But on the other side of that, I feel a strong pressure to impress strangers. So being away from my friends actually made me way better at speech class than I ever would have been if I had filled it with a bunch of comfort zone bodies.
Yeah.
So the feedback is really important, and getting as much of it as possible is something that we need to do. And that's going to be hard for some projects where you're working alone. And you need somebody else's viewpoint, and it's going to be hard if you don't have time, if you don't go out of your way to maybe go to a teacher during office hours or to find some sort of mentor, anything like that. But without good feedback, what are we going to do other than kind of flounder around in a circle and say, maybe that's better? I have literally no idea.
I do have 2 ideas for getting some feedback on your own. So one of them is find a way to record yourself if you can.
Oh, yeah,
if it makes sense. So and this isn't going to apply to every skill, but for singing specifically, I practice like every day, in the shower, but I can only hear myself from the perspective of the person making the noise.
Yeah.
And that is not indicative of how I actually sound. And I also will be in a certain frame of mind given kind of what I want to focus on. So if I'm singing like a really powerful, like, intense song with a lot of high notes, I might be in that headspace, but then I may not be focusing on how to transition to the softer parts. So I try to make it a point to go and record myself, and I'll just let Audition record, and I'll just play songs on Spotify and sing to them into the microphone, and I'll do like 45 minutes of that. So I'll often have like three takes of one song, and then I'll move on to another one, and then I just sit there and listen back.
You gotta play it super loud in the car with the windows down.
Yeah, there we go.
No, this is me.
Hey guys, hey, check it out. I'm pretty good, huh? But I'll sit there and listen back and be like, oh, okay, the way that I pronounced that syllable was not right. You know, like, and sometimes you listen to a song and you know what the lyric is, and you hear how the singer pronounces it, and it may be the way that it has to be pronounced to hit the note correctly, but it's not the way that you would pronounce it in speech. So when you're like doing it yourself, you don't even think about the way you need to pronounce the syllable. You'll just pronounce it the same way you would when speaking, and it sounds weird. And there's a song by like Hands Like Houses, and there's just like an instance where he says like the word to, but it's a really, really high note. So you don't want to say like to, it has to be like, I don't know, like toe, or it works well when you're singing. But if you don't record yourself, or you don't have a coach telling you these things, you may not ever notice what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll notice that a lot of times, like, I sound on pitch to myself, but maybe I'm not opening my mouth enough, and in my head it sounds on pitch, but it's actually a little bit flat because I'm kind of muffling my voice a little bit. And then I'll do another take, and all right, I'm going to focus on opening up more, being a little bit brighter. Oh, hey, now I'm much more on pitch.
Yeah. Recordings are a great idea. Anytime, I've used that with language too, actually. Anytime you can get to compare your work to something, you need something to compare it to, and you need to know exactly what you're comparing for. Then you can work on getting some feedback for yourself.
Yeah.
And it'll work.
And speaking of comparing, that's the other idea for kind of like giving yourself feedback is finish a project, and then I know they often say like don't compare your work to other people, and I think that's for like self-confidence reasons. But on a technical standpoint, I think it does help to watch something you've created and then go kind of compare it against a standard that you look to as like the standard of excellence in that field.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, how much closer did I get? While trying to keep in mind that you're not trying to completely imitate the standard of excellence because you want to put your own spin on it. But when you look at individual things, like, all right, how did my timing feel compared to what I think is really good timing? If I'm editing a video, what elements of sound design did I kind of not even think of that they're using? And I think it's still better to get feedback from other people, but if you just can't, then it might be a way to at least kind of give yourself a benchmark.
Yeah.
All right, so that was another group of 3. So that was drills, retrieval, and feedback, right?
Yep. Good retrieval. You're going to learn this.
And the first ones were Metalearning, Directness, and focus. But focus was number 2.
There you go.
I
could have just told you, wait, no, that was number 3, but I didn't. And now Tom knows the order.
Focus,
through the
directness,
power of retrieval.
Drills, retrieval, feedback. All right, last group of 3.
Yeah. Okay. Number 7 is retention. So the another thing related to the spacing effect, but kind of the flip side, because people forget things. You may have noticed, or maybe you didn't notice.
I've never forgotten anything.
I've never forgotten anything.
Steel trap.
Part of this that I found interesting was that in the book he mentioned that there was a study that reported that doctors give worse medical care the longer they've worked, as their stored knowledge from medical school fades away and they're relying more on habits that have built up. And they're going to gain certain types of knowledge, sure, but there are going to be some things that, like, if they haven't run into it enough in their careers, they're just going to fade away because they weren't as relevant. So that was, I'd never considered that before. That was pretty weird. But can we mitigate forgetting things a little bit? So the spacing effect helps. That's one thing that we can do simply because the more that we retrieve things actively, the better the memory is. But there's another thing where one of the pieces of studying advice that he says is best supported by research is that if you want to have long-term retention, you shouldn't cram. You should spread your learning sessions over more intervals to make the spacing effect work. And this is another thing that kind of justifies what I did in school a little bit, because I also did not really study for most tests. I did for a few. I did for statistics. Some of the math ones I had to study a little bit the day before. That I didn't have a good reason to have all that memorized.
Yeah.
But I explicitly refused to study for language tests because I knew that if I crammed the night before, I'm not giving myself I want to know what the grade is because I want to know, can I pull these words out of my head? Like, if it's not about just the grade, if it's not about just passing, cramming only tells you that you're capable of remembering something from yesterday.
Yeah, I guess it's
true. Which is not that useful in a conversation if it's a language, or in anything, if you need that skill later. Unless you're going to cram before every conversation, or if my surgeon needs to cram, and he's just got the tech, he's just like, hold on. Nailed it. Okay, we're going to start. I don't necessarily like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they might do well then, but I'd really like somebody who had more in their head already knowledge.
Yeah.
To do these things.
Okay.
So I mentioned Anki earlier for retrieval. It does mathematical things to give you the spacing effect with flashcards. And I found one thing really useful here was he was talking about how he wanted to maintain his languages after the language challenge, which is always something I've been annoyed by.
Yeah.
Maintaining languages is obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know why I hadn't thought to do specifically this, but he would schedule conversations once a week over italki, the same thing I use, and then he did that for a year, after which he dropped it to once a month for another 2 years, and just did spacing effects via conversation.
Oh, with conversations. Okay.
And I don't know why I didn't consider that before. It seems fairly obvious to put the two together, but you never know.
And that way you don't have to stress yourself out with having, 4 conversations a week, every week forever.
See, I did that for a while when I was just trying to keep it fresh, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So that actually inspired me, and I now have some fresh French and Spanish lessons that I'm going to do every couple of weeks just to keep from feeling rusty.
Cool.
Languages are best when I can actually use them when suddenly necessary, because you can't cram before an emergency that requires something. I don't know. What if I meet a French person who's having a heart attack? I can't help them anyway, but at least we'll be able to chat. Another.
Once an actual medical professional saves them, then you can have a chat.
Yeah, we'll hang out. So the other thing that isn't just the spacing effect here is overlearning things helps you remember. So if you have the base piece of something and it forms a smaller part of something much bigger eventually, doing the bigger thing will eventually make the smaller thing mindless. Like when I'm working through a piano song, the beginning of the song, if I keep practicing starting at the beginning, I can play the beginning of practically every song I've ever played.
Yeah.
Because I played that every single time I tried to get through and get to the rest of the song. And that's not necessarily the best technique for me to master each part of a piano song.
Yeah.
But if there's a little beginning part you have to do that many times, eventually you've learned it so much that you no longer need to even consider it. It just kind of happened, like riding a bike, because you overlearn how pedaling the bikes, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And you do it so much that it becomes mindless. If you can make something a part of something bigger, like I'm focused on where I'm going on a bike, not is the bike working? I need to check. That's not useful, but it becomes second nature. And then you probably won't forget it for years and years and years and years.
Yeah. It's like certain keyboard shortcuts. You use them every day.
Well, yeah, and it's like how passwords, like the ones that I type in the most, I can't even necessarily picture the characters in my head. I just know that my fingers do them.
Yeah.
And that could be considered dangerous. But it becomes automatic. It's no longer something that I need to worry about spacing effect testing. It's mindless now.
This is something that I have to remind myself and my ego about when doing bouldering routes in the climbing gym, because often the first, I'll get the first 3 moves, and then it's like move 4 or 5 or the crux or whatever it is that's really, really difficult. And my brain's like, the only way that you're going to actually be able to say you did this is if you do the whole route. So I will stubbornly keep starting from the beginning. When what I should do, because with bouldering, you can often just use other holds that aren't part of your route, or you can sometimes even just jump up to the hold you need, or maybe it's a traversal route, so you can just start in the middle. Start in the middle. Yeah. Practice that last half of the route until you get that, and then put it all together. Same thing with a dance routine. You wouldn't continually start from the first move when you're trying to practice the last move.
Yeah, and in those kind of situations, overlearning happens completely by accident if you just start from the beginning every time. But if you use it on purpose and you've just done it so much and you've gone so far and beyond, you may need to use retrieval or spacing effects to get the later parts of what you learned.
Yeah.
But at least a decent chunk of it will probably always be there. I imagine if I did not practice Spanish or French for another 5-10 years, I would still be able to be rusty in it.
Yeah.
I don't think it would just, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, even speaking like of something that I know I haven't used in many, many years, I can open up command prompt and traverse through directories.
Yeah.
On Windows.
Yeah, because
and I haven't done it in many years, but
part,
I just did it so often.
Because it's
in college.
Just a smaller part of what you're doing. You're never like, I'm going to open this up and traverse directories. You're doing it for a reason, so you don't even think about that. You just do it a million times.
I don't think I'll ever forget dir/a/od. I just because I had to do it. Like it was my job.
Yeah.
It was crazy because I remember when I got that job, I was watching people do that, and I was like, these guys are wizards. This is so complicated. They're literally like hacking the matrix. And then you eventually learn it. Oh, wait, no, it's just a directory listing. And there's a command that lists the directory in a specific way or moves to a subdirectory or goes up.
Yeah. I would imagine this is part of why people who become experts at stuff often can't explain the things very well. Mm-hmm. Just those because things, they're now mindless for them. They don't have to think about it anymore.
Well, yeah, Ransom went skiing with me once, and I was trying to explain how to get back up after he had fallen. And then I was trying to explain how to do, like, your turns. And I was racking my brain as hard as I could, trying to explain every component of the move. And it just wasn't working for him. And then a ski instructor who was just patrolling by stopped because he was having trouble. And this is why people go to school for teaching specifically. Because I used to be like, why can't you just go to school for chemistry and then be a chemistry teacher? He just knew exactly. He's like, put your ankle like this angle, lean this way. And I'm like, I would have never thought to say those things. I just do it. My conscious brain doesn't know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So, there's a big component to like the expert. What is it, the expert paradox? Where experts don't know how to explain what they're doing.
I think I might know it by another name, but I mean, that makes perfect sense. There are probably a million names. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably right. Okay, so number 8, intuition, which was actually, I found this the most resonant for me.
Okay.
Basically, you should have a very deep foundation of what you're doing before necessarily building on that skill a whole bunch. There was a quote in the beginning from Eric Bishop, a mathematician, that is, do not ask whether a statement is true until you know what it means. So we're trying to seek a deeper level of understanding here so that we can avoid things like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where if you don't know about something, you don't know what you don't know. You've barely just glanced at the surface. You can't even imagine what lies beneath it.
Yeah.
So you think, well, obviously I know how that works. I know how my TV works. You press these buttons. But if you've never even considered, wait, but how does that like really work?
Yeah.
You have no idea how much you don't know about it.
It reminds me of that. There's like a line in the movie about Alex Honnold doing the free solo, which that's the movie, Free Solo. Free soloing El Capitan. And one of the filmmakers was saying, like, people who don't know about free soloing, people who don't really know what Alex is doing, think, that seems doable. That seems fine. People who do know what he's doing and have like been in rock climbing are absolutely terrified that he would even attempt it.
Yeah,
because
it
once you understand,
you're seeing somebody who can do it. Mm-hmm. Well, of course it looks easy at this point.
Yep. Yeah, watching somebody do something like, oh, I understand those movements, but there's so much you don't understand.
Yeah. And so there was a study on people solving, or they weren't solving the physics problems, but they were given a bunch of physics problems. Mm-hmm. These were physics. I think they were undergrad students. I don't remember exactly. But they were asked to sort the problems into categories. And they found that beginners would sort them by superficial features, such as whether the problem was about pulleys or maybe inclined planes. The experts focused on the deeper principles. So they'd be like, conservation of energy over here. And they'd be sorting it by the underlying concept that would help you solve the problem, not just, look, a train. These are trains.
Yeah.
And the experts were thinking several levels deeper, and that's why they were experts. And he talks a lot about Feynman in this section. So he talks about how Feynman didn't really master things by just following along with other people. He would mentally try to recreate the results himself, and sometimes he had to repeat work. He'd reinvent the wheel merely to understand the wheel, essentially. And it made him a lot slower. Like Feynman said, some people think in the beginning that I'm kind of slow. I don't understand a problem because I ask a lot of these dumb questions. But that's only because his threshold for what it means to understand something is much higher than just barely usable, let's move on. So when you're trying to work with abstract ideas, it might be useful to try to think of concrete examples where they work. So if I was trying to imagine a structure, I probably wouldn't do a very good job until I tried to build it with Legos or something. I don't think that I have the training and experience to be able to really picture a solid structure and figure out how it works. And you get feedback a little bit from this, because if you're trying to picture something that's abstract and give it a concrete example, and you can't come up with a concrete example, that's a pretty good sign that you may not actually understand the abstract concept. So a lot of this, because we're talking about Feynman, involved crazy science things.
Yeah.
But like you were saying with the piano earlier, reading through a music theory book and being like, major seventh, minor seventh, this one is diminished. I could read all that and say, that made sense, and then go to the piano and then not do anything and not understand at all what that meant.
Yeah. And there's a deeper understanding. I'm sure you have kind of felt this as you've progressed in your piano study. There's a deeper understanding to a key, or to say, a natural minor scale versus a melodic or harmonic minor scale. There's a deeper understanding than just understanding that it's one semitone shift.
Yeah.
There's an understanding that comes in playing it and hearing and repeating the relationships between those two notes in your perception of how they sound and what kind of feeling that can give what you're playing.
Yeah.
You can't get that just by reading it.
If you stop at the top level of abstract stuff that you could have written about, you're not going to get a feel for it. And I feel like a lot of the things that one gets good at, you sort of feel what you're supposed to do next. I can play most of the songs that I play on piano without looking, and I can shift chords and try a new one without looking, without thinking too hard about it, simply because I've gone through it enough times. I understand what's happening. I'm not just hitting random notes and saying, do those sound good together? I get the relationship between, you were talking about the triads and all of the chords earlier, and understanding how inversion works rather than going, but that one looks wrong. Oh, well, it sounds good. Yep. Understanding why it looks different than the other ones, and it's just this one, shifted a little bit, is going to make it so that you can recreate it over and over. And this part resonated with me a lot simply because it's why I'm so slow at everything all the time. I take forever to do things, and I'm just I can't set up this thing yet. I need to know 1,000 details about what this runs on. And then, 800 details in, just well, that changes everything. And it takes forever. But it's basically the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Just assuming that there's going to be a ton that I don't already know, and I want to make sure I don't jump into something incorrectly if there are reasonably high stakes.
It means you're not truly slow.
Yeah.
You just might not be the, ready, fire, aim
It's
kind
like
of
a
person.
tortoise versus hare situation. Except for in real life, that wouldn't work out that way. The hare would win.
Or if you think about a linear progression versus a exponential progression.
Yeah, it's
you start off
slow,
works,
and then
it's faster.
Eventually you'll overtake. Yeah, where the linear one is still going just the same speed as before. There are no advantages there.
Always think about that the example that my church pastor did when I was like 10 years old or something, where he has the assistant pastor just like with a screwdriver screwing nails into a block of wood, and he gets like 3 or 4 in while the actual pastor's like plugging in a power drill and like putting a bit in there. Yeah. But then once he's ready, oh, what you doing over there? Looking a little slow over there.
Yeah, like the setup may take longer, and that may be frustrating, but it pays off, and then you end up way better off. So
all right, we have a final principle here.
And the final principle.
I wonder if I can guess it.
Guess.
Intuition. We have feedback already. We have retention and retrieval, which are we have focus. All right, here's my guess. Rest.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay.
Ultra learners don't sleep.
Never sleep. It's not any form of like step away from it for a while.
No, I'm sure that's implied. Okay,
it's
not a principle in here.
I have one other guess. So my first guess was rest. My second guess was expanding into other topics to combine what you learn to gain deeper understanding.
That's kind of true. That's kind of right.
Okay.
A little bit. It's like half of what this is about. A little bit. It's experimentation.
Oh.
So like that falls under that umbrella. That is a way to do it.
Fairly close. I would say it's not a perfect guess.
It was a reasonably close guess, though, given that it was just a guess. Anyway, experimentation, obviously, is, trying new things. Wow, yeah. I've never heard of that before. But trying many things can allow you to find the things that line up with you best, like the things that they emphasize your strengths, they minimize your weaknesses. You can't quite know that without trying things out. The difference between... the example he gives is the difference between a novice programmer and a master isn't usually that the novice can't solve certain problems. It's just that the master knows the best way to solve it, which will be the most efficient and which will be the cleanest and be the most sustainable going forward, because they can pull that solution out from like the 10 potential solutions they thought of immediately.
Which they've probably tried.
The novice can solve it with one. Novice me mangled a terrible website in WordPress by putting the source code, I think the source HTML for a bootstrap page, into the WordPress editor and positioning everything with CSS position relative and moving everything pixels at a time. And every time I put something in, I had to move everything else again. And it does work. It is a solution. But obviously, being a better programmer now, I see that was very possibly the worst solution I could have picked. It just worked, but that's not good enough to be an expert at anything.
That's kind of the beauty of like problem solving, and I think like the more you get into something, the more you realize this. Like there isn't one way to do things. There are often many different ways to get to the same destination. It's just that usually there's one that is better than the others.
Yeah, this is why I'm also super slow at things, because now I'm like trying to make sure that I don't do something quite that ridiculous anymore. But he does list out 3 types of experimentation to narrow things down a little bit.
Okay.
The first is experimenting with new learning resources. Okay. So let's say you got a textbook, or you're using Duolingo, or you're taking a class. You pick your first resource. You use it pretty rigorously for some set amount of time that you know you're going to use it for. Set up and be like, I'm going to study using this for long enough that you would actually know if it's working. And then after that, you can review, did that work, or should I move on to a different thing? Should I get a new tutor? Is that not working for me? Am I reading the wrong book? Etc. We just try new tools. The second is experimenting with technique. So switching between the subtopics and subskills of something, they can help you in ways that you don't see coming, because they might combine and unlock features in the other subskills that you didn't know about at first. And the last is to experiment with different styles. Apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently Van Gogh was not all that celebrated for a long time, and he ended up trying many different painting styles before he eventually arrived at the style that made him famous, that we know for like Starry Night, etc. That style came after he experimented with tons of different styles to imitate other artists and see, how does this work? No, that doesn't feel right. Over and over and over and over and over. Eventually, we liked the work, but had he not gone through all the styles, he wouldn't have found the ones that lined up with his strengths.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
And that is, a super quick rundown of a fairly intensive book. Like, we've easily gone on for a while, barely scratching the surface of all of these. So you can go deeper, just so you know.
By reading the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember. What's the 8th one? Because we had retention, and then something, and then experimentation.
Oh no, I'm cheating. I'm not going to help my own retrieval here because I'm just
You're not
looking.
going to help your own retrieval.
I'm going to forget it.
I feel like it had to do with we talked about the expert paradox in there. All right, let me go from the beginning. We had Metalearning. We had focus. We had directness. That was group 1.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Then we had drills. Right?
Yep.
Boy, human memory is bad because I had these and I reviewed them and now they're...
It's really great that you don't remember this one.
There's retrieval.
Yeah, there it is. You retrieved it. Good job.
And then there is... Oh my gosh. Why did I had this in my head.
He's choking.
Mom spaghetti.
Yeah.
He's on a sweater already. He's nervous, but he's ready.
Watch out! You're gonna forget this list. You're gonna be too busy remembering about spaghetti.
Okay. Metalearning, focus, directness, drills, retrieval. Oh my gosh, the last one was experimentation. Now I've lost 6, 7, and 8.
Oh no!
See, this is the problem.
Well, that's it. That's the end of the podcast.
You're just gonna sit here for 20 minutes of dead air as Tom tries to remember them.
Yeah.
They often say that the human short-term memory can only hold 6 to 7 bits of data at once, and this is a really good example of why that is true.
I never remember a full list ever. I always miss one. At least one is gone every time I list something.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, we sat here for an hour talking about these things.
Yeah.
All right. So I got to retrieval. All right. One of them is retention. Right.
That's 7.
Was that 7?
Yeah.
So 5 was retrieval, 7 was retention. Very, very similar ones, right?
Yeah. They're like flip sides of
the coin. And then 9 was experimentation. Was one of them just practice?
That is neither 6 nor 8.
Okay, what are 6 and 8?
Feedback. And intuition. Now,
That's
this is
right.
probably the least effective wrap-up of the because we've just mixed them up now.
Intuition. That's right. Okay, Metalearning. Focus, directness, drills, retrieval, feedback, retention, intuition, experimentation.
That's number wang.
That's
we did it.
That's number wang. Okay, we did it. Anyway, I guess if you want to learn more about these or potentially have a better chance at remembering them yourself, go read the book. It's called Ultralearning. It's by Scott Young. Apparently, it's good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I would say that it has. I'm taking more language lessons again. That was a very good result of this, and I'm excited to ultralearn stuff.
Yeah,
this year. I don't know what yet entirely.
I don't know how many productivity books I'm going to read.
I think I'm gonna kind of branch out from that. I just was interested because I saw the drawing, which, by the way, if you couldn't see it when I held the camera my phone up to the camera, or if you're listening, you should definitely check out the show notes just to see the ridiculous difference that he made between his drawing of human faces in 30 days.
Yeah, the amount
because
you can
that's
do
what
in
sold
30
me
days.
on this book, and what was my little system of doing stuff for 2 weeks at a time. This is proof that small amounts of time, if you pick the right things for them, can actually change things.
Yeah.
So it got me motivated, at minimum. Even if you read this and you get nothing else from it, that's inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Well, those show notes, speaking of the show notes, are going to be at cigpodcast.com/288 because we are at the 288th episode.
Yeah.
And we are not in the business of doing different numbers on the end of our URLs
Well,
that don't mix, that don't match.
That would be.
But our next podcast,
very
episode 1, is going to be
confusing.
at /722. It's going to be a random mix mash.
Every episode number will just be like a Pokemon that we wanted to honor.
Yeah. But it's going to be encrypted too. Like you're going to have to find a secret key in the episode that decrypts a random string of letters. And then if you feed that into
How to
Google
lose all of
Translate
your
18
listeners.
times,
Step 1.
back to English. Anyway, check out those show notes. Thanks for listening. As always, you can go over to cigpodcast.com with no trailing slash or numbers if you want to find out how to subscribe to this show. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Podcast Addict, I don't know what else. All the things. Stitcher, Spotify,
Anything
YouTube,
with a cast.
all the things. If you want to comment on this podcast, the YouTube channel is probably the best place to do it. Once again, cigpodcast.com has a link to it, or you can just type in the College Info Geek podcast into YouTube, probably in the search bar. Probably not like as your name on the profile. That won't get you anything.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not.
It might though, but probably almost certainly not.
Yeah, the propagation of entropy is a probabilistic rule. It's not a certain thing. So anything is truly possible.
Yeah, anything is possible.
It's just there's a non-zero chance of literally basically anything. But it's a point
I wouldn't
roll
the dice on that one.
Yeah, it's a many sided die. So
How many sides would it have?
a lot of them.
How do I picture that shape? It's just a sphere.
The number of sides that are possible
It's
to
basically
fit
just a
into
sphere.
It's
imperceptible.
But
The molecule on top is the
any
side.
any sphere that exists in the real world has
It's just
like, it must have
it's just a die.
a number of sides.
Right? It's just a die. It's just that we didn't count enough sides. We're just lazy.
It's true. Break out the magnifying glass. I
That's
got
what
one
you should
sitting
take from this lesson.
right there. Start
Spheres
counting the sides. on
are
the spheres.
dice.
Something like
That's
technically.
episode 288.
Technically, yeah. All right. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you want to support this show, we are on Apple Podcasts, and they have a rating and review system. So one way you can help to spread the show, I guess, around is to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, which I believe bumps us up the rankings somehow. Otherwise, you can just share this podcast with a friend. Maybe they will become a listener as well. And that about does it. So thanks, as always, for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you in the next one. Stay cute.